All good to see you. Thanks for coming. Today is a really interesting day in respect to picking up on where I left off the first Sunday, starting to introduce the idea of divine order, and then we talked a little bit about last Sunday too, but the focus was, of course, on 9/11. And so probably by the title you can tell it's going to be an interesting thought project we're going to do today. Because when I was thinking about order in general, but also, which I explained on the first Sunday, that divine order is really one that drives everything. You know, many, especially in from traditional Christian thought, they consider divine order to be the driving force, God as being a driver, as an active force in our lives. That's the traditional view. And you see this, you know, every day on TV. You see this in conversation with others. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. That, well, God did this to me, and God did this, and God didn't do this, and all that. And in Unity, we believe God to be a little bit different, right? We don't really believe in God as being a driving force, so to speak. We actually consider ourselves to be the driving force, which is a different way of thinking about God. God, as we like to say, is principle, infinite potential, and possibility. That is what God is. Everything that's ever been imagined will ever be imagined. Anything that's possible will ever be possible. That's all included in this vastness, this idea of God. And we, as God's children, if you want to see it that way, we have the ability to step into that potential, the full potential. It doesn't mean that we start doing magic tricks, or, you know, we can start creating, you know, another Earth next to ours or something like that. It just means that from our limited perspective, we have a lot more to offer to ourselves and the world. So when I thought about God as potential, I was then asking myself, well, how often do I really tap into that potential fully? Because that's what's needed. We need to tap into that potential to really fully realize what God is within ourselves and how we can express that in our lives. We need to fully embrace that idea in practicality, not just in thought, right? We can easily just kind of think about something, but what do we actually do with it? And then I had this funny idea. Anyone familiar with that place called Salata?
Yeah.
That salad bar that has about, I don't know, it seems like hundreds of choices, but probably has 40 or 50 different containers, and you get a bowl, and you just point to what you want, and then they add all the things that you love in your salad, right? And Elaine and I would love to go to that place, because whenever we eat there, we feel like we're actually eating a little healthier than we otherwise do. But we usually get the order to go, and the other thing I also do is I want this dressing on the side. And so I was, for some reason, that just when I was thinking about today's service, I was thinking about that. Thinking about going to Salata and thinking about, oh, can I please have the dressing on the side? Why? Why do we order our salads with the dressing on the side?
So you choose control.
So we can control it, right? We can control the amount of dressing that goes onto our salad so that it's not drenched, it's not overpowering. Some of us who need to look around here want to use a little less, and others saying, oh, well, what the hell with it, and just put it in, right? But it's that control aspect that I thought was really interesting that popped in my head, and it said, okay, so now let me think about this differently. What if I was putting God on the side, as I would do with my dressing, and I'm trying to control God as I sprinkle godness on the salad of my life? What if the salad is a concoction of everything I am and everything I want to be, but the secret ingredient is the dressing of God, and I prefer to have it on the side so I can control it? How much of God is going to be in my life? And then I realized that's not the way we're supposed to live. No. Now, I'm not saying you need to go now and start ordering your salad with lots of dressing, but I hope you understand the analogy that so often in my life I choose to limit that potential that's within me. I do that in meetings, I do that when I'm with other people, I do that to myself, not giving myself credit, not acknowledging the little milestones that I accomplish, just kind of move on as if nothing happened, right? Every time I do that, I kind of limit God. I limit God in its totality because it affects all of us, but I limit God within me as well. I'm actually standing in the way of really surrendering to that Christ self, the Christ that expresses my God essence. So that's the problem, right? It's the problem that we like to embrace God and become more Christ-like, that we like all these things, but then at the same time we end up limiting the opportunities that we are given every day. I keep saying in our admin meetings or whenever we talk about service and volunteering in the community, that most people think that the volunteering service aspect is really where the spiritual growth happens, but they're missing all the opportunities that come up when you start having meetings together and you start having disagreements together, and you're trying to fit that Christ and that Christ into the same Christness with each other. And that's really where spiritual growth happens, is in our adversities, in our challenges and our disagreements, to push through those disagreements and those understandings, to know that this is my truth, but the other person has their own truth as well, and try to harmonize that whenever possible. See, when we get to do this in the small scale, at home with our partners or at church, as we come together as a group and as a team, this will resonate out. What we learn in the spiritual community, whether it's Unity or any of the other spiritual communities that are embracing the idea of us not being lost sinners, but being great potentials, whenever we do that, it has a ripple effect out there. You can't stop. The negativity has a ripple effect too, and you can't stop. And that is divine order. So divine order is that underlying foundation of spiritual law that works all the time. It's working, it's running all the time. It never stops. It's 24/7. It's like gravity. You wouldn't expect gravity to stop between 11 and 12 on a Sunday morning. Right? You expect gravity to run all the time. Divine order works all the time And one of those laws that work with divine order is whatever is in our mind produces after its kind. Meaning that the way we think about ourselves and the world is ultimately reflected out in the world. First, it starts within us. And I think you can easily tell those people who are generally very pessimistic, negative people, compared to those who are generally optimistic and positive people, right? You can sometimes easily tell because the way they think about themselves is resonating within them so much that you can feel it. You can feel it coming out. And that kind of resonance resonates with others, their partners, their families, their friends, their colleagues at work. So here's the problem, right? So we're looking at the problem right now. The problem is that we like to control God, put it as a side order. We want to control something that is uncontrollable. And by doing that, we're missing the gift of really starting to resonate with that underlying law of divine order. Because once we get to resonate with that foundation, how spiritual law just works, how we flow, it's like just sitting on a little raft on the river. All we have to do is sit on it and let the river take us, and we make little adjustments where we want to go. Right? That's how easy it is. Well, if we try to limit God within us, then it's like trying to paddle upwind. Have you ever tried that? I tried that with a canoe once, 2 people in a canoe. I mean, it's exhausting, right? 20 years ago in New Zealand, we took the wrong turn. We had to turn around in our canoe. We had to try to get back up that river. We couldn't. The river is too strong. God, in its infinite potential, is strong. And when we try to get against it, that's when it starts hurting. It hurts. I had aches like that for days. I would feel my shoulders. I couldn't, it's like we had to stop. We had to go on shore and then carry the bloody canoe back to the crossing to take the right crossing. But for days, it hurt. And I know that most of us hurt for so many years because we were trying to go against God. Not the God out there, but the God within. Going against who we truly are inside. So what is the solution here? Whenever I'm faced with questions like that, I have, I use scripture, but I don't necessarily limit scripture just to the Bible. I studied Hinduism quite for a few years. The Bhagavad Gita gives a lot of comfort. The Upanishads, some of the Buddhist writings, even the story of Siddhartha becoming the Buddha. Beautiful story. I'd like to go back to read Hermann Hesse's prose on that story. It's just wonderful. But in this particular question, I simply turned to the New Testament, and I kind of like John's Gospel almost the best. I think it's a really cool gospel. It's representing the cosmic Christ, but it's very symbolic, and I resonate with that very much, especially when you try to metaphysically understand the written word. And I mentioned it during meditation, but I want to repeat it. John 14, verse 6 says, Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, some of you growing up in Baptist church or some of the traditional churches, you know this verse quite well, right? It's the one verse where the pastors and the leaders will tell you that's proof that you need to accept Jesus Christ in your heart and you need to surrender your life to Jesus Christ, right? Wouldn't you agree? There's two ways of looking at this. If I talk to a traditional Christian pastor and he is asking me, are you accepting Jesus Christ in your heart? I say absolutely. But my understanding of that is quite different than his understanding. I'm not putting Jesus up on a pedestal, separating myself from what he did to what I'm accomplishing or what I can do. But I accept Jesus Christ in my heart as accepting the same potential that he was expressing in his time, fully expressing in his time. I accept that in my heart, and I resonate that, and I believe and have faith that I can do the same things that he did and more. So when I read, no one comes to the Father except through me, I don't hear I have to go to Christ up there on the cross to get to the Father and then get to the heaven. It's all happening within me. I go through my Christ understanding, and that's how I get to the Father. I take God out of the little plastic container and throw it back into my life, my salad of life, and toss it around and turn it until I get a real good understanding of what it means to be Christ-like. And through that action and through that motivation and that idea, I get to the Father. That's what it means. And once I am with the Father, once I realize my God-likeness, I am the way, and I am the truth, and I am the life, like everyone else who realizes that exact thing. That is what is so unique about Unity and New Thought and some of the very few churches who consider the idea that we are living in a perfect oneness relationship with God potential. No separation, no denial, no limitation, no dressing on the side, fully immersed in it. You know, Paul wrote about this very idea later in his letter to the Ephesians. And he wrote in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 18, "For through him both of us have access in one spirit to the Father." For through him both of us have access in one spirit to the Father. Him, of course, meaning the Christ. For through him, for through the Christ understanding, for through knowing that I have the same potential, the same power, that I am the same as Jesus Christ, that's how I get and have access to the one Spirit and to the Father. So there are clear scriptures. Scripture tells us clearly that we have, or we take, or we should take this idea of Christ, what Jesus Christ represented, but we shouldn't just lament on it, something that happened 2,000 years ago, but bring it alive within us. And that's how we get to understand more of who we are as spiritual beings. So the question then comes, so now we know what the problem is, right? We kind of know the solution. But how are we going to practice that? That's the question, right? That's always that. How are we going to do that? How are we going to be the Christ? How are we going to figure this out? How am I supposed to know, with my limited understanding, what Christ actually means within me? How am I going to show up as someone who is fully expressing the Christ within? Am I going to compare myself to Jesus Christ? Do I have to do the same thing that he did? Do I have to start turning water into wine and walk on water? What do I have to do? Aren't those the questions that we sometimes have? Now, Unity gives us some tools: prayer, meditation, denials, and affirmation. And those are the basic tools that we teach, and I encourage everyone to embrace those. We also believe that there is 3 things we need to do. One is we need to study the Bible, study the books, study the principles, study the meaning, the metaphysics of it, what it means to us in our lives. That's important. We need to worship, not in a traditional sense. We need to come together, be together as a community, and we need to worship ourselves, not the limited self, but we need to worship the big self, the big Christ within. And we do that so much better when we are coming together as a community than by ourselves. Because we truly embrace this idea that if I'm the Christ, you must be the Christ too. You know, and if I see something wrong with you, then I have to remember myself, well, wait a minute, there's something wrong out here, but still you are the Christ. And if I allow that to be, if I allow you to be the Christ, then eventually I will allow myself to be the Christ too. And the third thing is practice. I don't know, how many of you know how to drive a stick shift? A few? So I'm on few. So I remember in Switzerland you're not allowed to drive before you're 18. So when you're 18 you get your ticket so you can start learning. And then I remember my mom going out. She was a brave woman. She still is, but she was a very brave woman. When I was 18, getting out with me on the car, oh my God, can you remember the first few times you tried to stick shift? Oh, how do I do this with the clutch and all this stuff? It was hard, right? It was hard and embarrassing. My mom was like she was tense like this next to me, and she yelled at me a couple of times because it was kind of going off the road while trying to shift gears, and I was useless. First few times I tried to drive a stick shift, I was absolutely useless. But I kept going. I kept going so much that now, after having not driven a stick shift for about 20 years, I could easily go out there, step in a car with a stick shift, and I could just drive off no problems. Why do you think that is? Because I practiced. And I didn't listen to my thoughts of embarrassment. I didn't believe that I'm useless. I didn't think that I never could learn it. And I was kind of blocking my mom's yelling here and there out. You know. That's exactly it. It takes practice. In the beginning it's hard, right? It takes a while. It's like trying to get from first to second gear, trying to find that clutch and find that sweet spot, you know? When the gears no longer make a lot of noise. That's what it is. It's going from gear 1, which is about being limited, being not good enough, being all that, and then just find that clutch of Christ and just press it just so slightly so you can step it up a notch. And in the beginning it's hard. And we might tell ourselves we never get it. We might even believe that we're a hopeless case. But I encourage you to just think of how it was for you to learn how to drive a stick shift. It just takes practice. It takes practice, believing yourself and having faith that Christ is something that is available to us at any time, and that we deserve to be immersed in that idea. So I'll leave you with that for today. As we go into the prosperity class for most of us, and if you want to join today, that's fine, please do so. Keep that in mind, that it takes practice, it takes study, and it takes worship. And best to restore that.